Hi there, Marisa Murray here today with a team effectiveness tip. So I think many of you are probably familiar with Tuckman's team dynamics model. I always found this really helpful to kind of identify where we were in the teaming process with my teams. So most people are familiar with forming, storming, norming, and performing. But there was actually a fifth, and that was adjourning. And adjourning was all around, in Tuckman's model, was all about the celebration that should occur at the end of a project or the end of a calendar year maybe, where you publicly recognize the entire team for their contribution. And my perspective was a lot of people in my experience did that quite well. There would be often a celebration for outstanding results for a team. But what was missing for me in the Tuckman's team dynamics model was sort of these mini adjournments that occur throughout the duration of a project or throughout the duration of an operations team. So the real dynamic on the ground is that often for long-term projects where there's skills and talents and people cycling in over different periods of time. So somebody may join the project for 3 months, make a very valuable contribution, and then their part is gone and they leave, but a lot of the core team remains. Or you could have an operations team that has somebody gets promoted or gets transferred to another division. So there's all of these kind of mini adjournments in the team dynamics process. And so what I found is that those mini departures were actually kind of missed opportunities, frankly, and that was sort of the birthplace of this game. What I noticed was that oftentimes there would be sort of an event to recognize that person's contribution. So there might be a lunch and learn or just a little potluck lunch to sort of recognize somebody, or there might be a cocktail, or there might actually be a dinner, depending on the duration or the importance of that person's contribution. And generally the way it would work would be the facilitator would actually do a very good job of introducing the setting, highlighting the individual for a few minutes. And maybe at the beginning of the event they'd say, we're here to recognize so-and-so. But what I would find is that oftentimes, very shortly following that brief framing up of the event, everybody would just start talking shop because they were figuring out tomorrow and they were figuring out new team members. And usually at the end of the event, whether that event was like 20 minutes long or an hour long, people had to kind of remind themselves again why they were there, and then there was sort of a goodbye. And I think a lot of times the individual that was actually being tributed kind of felt like left out when they left. They didn't necessarily feel fully recognized for their effort. And I thought there's a missed opportunity in a couple of different fronts. And so I invented this game, and this game is really to support a honoring of the individual that's leaving, but also more than that, have an opportunity for that team to reform, because recognizing that that team now has lost a key contributor and they're going to have to sort of reform. And then oftentimes, in my experience, if the new person replacing that individual or new team members were there, it was actually an opportunity to bring them on board as well. So I just want to convince you to kind of consider this when you're doing sort of these mini adjournments. And I really think that it's valuable for 3 reasons. First, I just mentioned, which is properly honoring the individual that's leaving. The second is, through this game, you'll see that you kind of start to hear lessons learned or consolidated knowledge from that experience. So it actually gives all the team members an opportunity to learn from that individual's experience when they're leaving. And the third is that it energizes and renews the team. They see how they will be recognized for their contribution. And in addition to that, they get an opportunity to reignite their team spirit. So I'm going to show you the game really quickly. I basically have had this box with me for a long time. In consulting, we often call these roll-off dinners or roll-off parties because you're rolling off a project. So it actually says, Marie says, roll-off questions. But I have used this in many different contexts. I have used this with operations teams, and I'm going to teach you my favorite version of it today. And so here's the exercise. The exercise is you formulate a number of questions and you allow the event to kind of go on, but every so often, I'd say probably every 5 to 10 minutes or so, you ask the individual that's being honored to pick a question out of this box. And there's 2 colors of questions out of this box. So I'll just pretend that I'm that individual and I'll pick out one. So as you see, I picked out a white one. There's actually white ones and yellow ones. And this is my favorite version of the game. So there is a version where there's only white ones. But I just picked out this question, and the person would read the question. And in the case of a white question, that's a question they answer themselves. And if they pick a yellow question, that's a question they ask somebody in the room to answer. So this question says, if this project engagement were an animal, what would it be and why? So it's a very silly question. It's lighthearted, but you actually get some pretty interesting answers sometimes. They explain, well, this project would be a tiger and here's why, and everyone laughs and etc. So that's an example of one of the questions, but the person gets an opportunity to reflect, and people get an opportunity to listen. So let me just play again, like let's pretend I picked a yellow one. And this yellow one would mean that the individual that's being honored would pick somebody to answer this question. And this question says, what memory of our guest of honor makes you smile or laugh out loud? And so then the individual would tell a little story. Anyway, basically, there's about 20 questions in here. I rewrite them sometimes, I add different ones, I adjust them, but the spirit of it is to create the environment where your team, as a leader, your team recognizes and honors the other person appropriately, learns from that person's experience, and gets energized by the fact that they recognize that their contribution will be honored both individually and as a team. So I hope that helps. If you like it, please share. And if you would like these directly to your inbox, please subscribe. And I hope you have a great day.